Morning, everybody. This is CAD 212, Architectural Apps in CAD on Monday, April 11th. Today in class, we're going to go over how to create advanced sites. We'll learn the difference between subregion and split surface. We've used split surface before, but there's also subregion available. We'll talk about the differences between those two and when you would use them. We're going to add elevations to our sites, and we're going to add a parking lot and parking lot components to our sites. We'll also learn how to use the array tool, and that's pretty much it for today, and we'll go ahead and jump into that now. So this is somebody's project that I was working on. We'll open that up. And before we jump into working on this project, let's open up another project so we can kind of play with the sites, and then we'll incorporate it into our actual project. Just throw a quick building together. Jump to 3D. Okay, so we got just a basic building. And what we're going to do to start with that is add a site to it. I'm just going to add a basic site, and that way we can talk about the differences between split surface and subregion. So remember, when we're creating sites, we want to go ahead and jump to the site floor plan, site plan. And notice that sometimes these elevation markers are very close to where we are. Sometimes we can change those by moving them here. Let's see if that'll work. No, that's not going to work. Well, it makes them just smaller at this point. But a lot of times you want to take these and just kind of move them out of the way, because depending on the size of the site, and this is actually going to be a very big site because we're going to incorporate a parking lot into it. We just want to kind of move these guys back. Make sure that you don't delete them and just move them straight back from the view that they're in now. Okay, so that gives us enough room for our site. So let's just do a quick site. And remember, to do sites, we're going to go to the Massing and Site tab. We go to the model panel and the topo surface tool, and we'll just throw in a couple of points here to add that site. So this is just a basic site that we're creating right now. Let me turn the color on here, set to consistent color. And one of the things that people tend to forget is to delete that site from inside that building. So let's do a refresher on that. And to do that, we go to 3D. Let's turn consistent color on again. And let's turn building over. So the difference between the two is when we use split surface, as we've done before, click on split surface, click on the surface that we want to split, and we'll draw the shape that we want to create. And at this point, with it still active, I can just hit delete and it's gone. So now I have building looking how I want it to look. With subregion, I can do the same thing. Let me go from a top view on here. I can draw a shape that I want it to look like and hit the check mark. So now I have a special subregion of this site here. So as you notice, if I click on the larger site, it's still active. And if I click on the smaller site, it's still active too. So here, for instance, if I wanted to change this to, say, a pool material, even a water material, I could just change the material over here. Let's just change the material of that. Let's just pick the bright one. So here I have this big yellow blob here, which is my subregion. Let me create one as a split surface as well. I'll do the same thing here. So we've got two spots that basically seem to be similar in the way that they work. But if I decide that I don't want this space here, I'm going to get rid of it, and I click on it, hit delete, well, I've got a hole in my property now. If I decide I don't like this one and I just hit delete, well, it just makes that subregion disappear. It doesn't make that whole separate piece of surface disappear. So there's times that you'll want to use split surface, which is to pretty much create a void in your property. But if you're adding like grass or any type of landscaping, or if you're creating like a pool or some kind of thing like that in here, you can, it's better to use subregion. If you're creating like sidewalks and stuff, driveways, I always prefer to use subregion as well, just because if you have a client that doesn't like the way that particular parking lot or landing pad looks, you can delete it very easily, and then you can just redraw it, where here you have a whole issue with, now you have a big hole in your site and have to fix that. And then we can just fix that by editing the surface and moving the points back together. But it does get to be a bit frustrating when you try to do that. So you can see how much longer it takes to make that go away. So that's basically the two reasons that we use those. So as we're creating our advanced site today, which would be our parking lot, I would prefer that you use subregion to create your walkways and your pathways and the rest of your driveways as you're creating that. Because if you need to make any changes, it's just much easier. So let me delete this, and let's move on to our actual site that we're going to be creating. Jump down to our site plan. Remember, we want to start with property line here. We're going to be creating a very large site, and we're going to create that by sketching. It's a very large building we've created, so we want to do something that's so. Let's do this 130. By 160. So I'll add this to the mod. So the site should be 130 by 160. And we'll leave that there. You can have the building centered wherever you want in it. I'll allow that for you. So the next thing we're going to do is add some elevations. And that just will show different undulations in your site. It makes it a little bit more interesting. Obviously, you're not going to have that too much down in New Orleans, but say if you wanted to add some, landscaping where you had some different elevations in it and things like that, it's just kind of a fun and different tool to know. So let's kind of play with that a little bit. So I've got the size of my site here, And we're going to add those elevations now. So I'll go back to Massing and Site tab. You're still going to use the Topo Surface tool, but now when you use the Topo Surface tool, notice here they have an elevation change. Everything's been set to 0 so far that you've created. So at this point, we can change these elevations. Let's just make this -5, and I'm just going to randomly picking different elevations. Let's make this a -2. Let's change this up to 3 feet. And notice how I have these different elevations here. It's changing that. You can kind of see them kind of coming up here. Say we had another dip in the property here, so back to -2 feet. And then 5 foot. Let's do something like that. So it's rather dramatic, and we can see the difference. So we can see that we've definitely added some elevation, and you can see how that breaks here. So let's jump to 3D to see how it actually looks. When we flip our property around, you can see there's lots of different undulations and different levels on our property now. So it does make it really interesting. And if you get a survey done, you can actually add the specific survey points to get the actual elevations of the land. Obviously, we don't see something like this very often in Louisiana, especially South Louisiana. But there's a lot of times you do have to take into consideration the elevations of the property. So notice we still have the property going through the building. Well, let's fix that first. You're still going to do that the same way that you did that, fix that the same way you did before by using split surface. And just draw that shape that we want. And delete that. So now that we've deleted the site from the inside of the building to come around here, we still have a lot of problems with in regards to how high this land is around the building. You know, in some places you can't get in, you know, totally block your view. This is totally not what you would want. So we need to set all of our points that are around the actual building itself to 0. So what do I mean by that? Let me go ahead and click on the site, make it active, hit edit surface. And notice we have these different points right around our building. So we want to select all those points, and you can just drag those. And we want to set those now to a 0 elevation. And when you do that, you'll see how the site changes. And let's turn upside down, right side up. Now, all of our sites, all our points are connected to 0. Around here, we're not having any, you know, land, you know, up against the walls of the building or anything like that. You know, do we have the best site here? No, probably not. Because if you look at it here, you have all these elevations that are running towards the house. So if it rains, especially in New Orleans, you're just going to get this little building inundated with rain and water just running down those slopes. So there's ways that you want to think about your upgrading your elevations when you do it. Also, if you do an elevation like this in your sites and you like most of it, you want to change it a little bit, we can edit this as well. So let's go back to a top view. Remember, we always want to work from a straight on view. So let's click on this site again, make it active, and then we'll go to edit surface. Well, notice on here we have place points. Well, at this time, I can go ahead and place different points. Set the elevation of those points. And as I set those points, it's going to change my elevations. So I'm just pulling these back. And if we go back to 3D and spin it around, we can see how we've created more of better piece of land around there. And now we have this kind of sloping away for the running water. It's a better situation here. Also, if you wanted to kind of change the other way it looks again, let's click on the site, make it active, hit edit. If we pick a particular point, and notice that point set to 5 feet, you can change one point at a time. We'll set that to 0. And check mark. And notice how that particular point is now flat. So you can edit it, but a lot of times when you start playing with these sites and you want them to be to the specific, size you want, it's just easy to kind of play with it. And then if you don't like the way it looks, just delete it and start over. Let's go back to our site tab. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to create a parking lot, create a space with the elevations, and then I'm going to start adding my parking lot components and how to create a parking lot here. So with the site that it's placed on like this, you want to think, typically, if you're given a site, you have that in advance to think about how the building is going to rely on the site itself, how it's going to interact with the site. Then there's also the opportunities to, if you have the site itself and you can place the building anywhere you want on it, you can think about how that ground is going to work around that site and how you can create the landscaping around it rather than with it. So here we've come in and we have carte blanche to create our site the way we want to. We've placed our building in the space we want to place it. And we're going to start creating our site. So I just want to have like maybe a berm up here where there's some landscaping. And I'm going to use this front section just for my parking lot. So I'm going to leave this to start at 0 because I want it to like kind of come down a little bit. I want it to slope back. And then as I go forward a little bit, I'm going to raise the elevation. Just a little bit at a time, maybe up to 4 feet. And then I'll bring that back down to 0. Let's flip that to 3D. We'll see what we're looking at. So what I wanted to do here is just create a little elevation here where I can put some like trees and things like that. It slopes either way. And then I'm going to use this whole front area and side area for my parking lot. So from this view, I'm going to go to my parking components. Well, actually, no, let's not do parking components next. Let's do our subregion next where we create our parking lot. And I'm not paying attention to my dimensions here, but that would always be the case. You'll be laying out those dimensions, and I would actually sketch out what I would want to draw before I did this. So I want to see how this incorporates in, how I want it to incorporate into my site, more of a design aspect. Let's take this and let's change the material category. Create new material. And All right, cancel out of that. And I'm just going to change this to, you could change it to whatever you want, but just for speed, we're just going to go to cast in place concrete. And now we have our parking lot set. So now I'm going to go to parking components, massing and site tab, model, panel, parking components tool. And we'll take a look through here. So the only one that's preloaded is our parking space, which is fine because we are going to need parking spaces. So let's go ahead and learn how to just drop in this one parking space. So when we bring that in, we'll have that set right here. And then you can come back and click one at a time and just kind of carry those across like that. And you can see that could take forever. So that's where the array tool comes in really nice. So we'll go to the modify tab, the modify panel, and these little squares right here are the array tool. So we'll click on that, make it active. We'll click on the parking that we want to create. We'll right click and finish selection. Now I want to start at this point and I want to move it to this point. Notice how it just duplicated one and I have two of them here. Well, if I change that to 10, now it's just created 10 spots all the way across. I still have room for a couple more, so I can click on one, make that active. It still will give me an option here to change that to 12. And actually 12 works out really well. So we have that nicely spaced. We've got a little space on either side. We have all of our parking spots there. You'll continue making parking spots, but I think I've got a set of 50 that you need to make. Yeah, parking lot should have 50 parking spaces, including 4 ADA spaces with handicap signage. We're going to learn how to do that along with islands, and then you'll create sidewalks and street access to the parking lot and additional site structures as desired. So let's do a few of those. So let me just add in like that driving access. I'm going to go to Massing and Site tab. We'll go back to my subregion tool. And I'm just going to create a driveway in to this space. And I'll change that to cast in place concrete. So now I have access. If I wanted to add some sidewalks, I would do the same thing just by creating the shape and then changing that. So let's go back to our parking components. Notice it was just the parking spaces that were incorporated. So let's go ahead and go back to load family. And this is in their sites and parking. And here you'll see we have a few different things that we can add, which is because to make things a little interesting, we have these parking islands that we can incorporate into there. We've got our ADA spaces. Let's do parking ADA space. So we have this one. Let's use this one. Obviously, this would prefer to be butt up against the building. So I already laid those out. Actually, let's do this. We need to add those. So we'll click on this one. We'll change that back to 8. And then we can add our ADA parking over here. And notice it's going to shorten it from where you started. So if I started drawing my parking lots here and they were arrayed this way, then it would change from there. So let's go ahead and add those ADA parking. Back to massing and site tab, parking components. We have our ADA one that we want to add. And we just kind of bring this guy in right here. And we can array these as well, but we can just drop in a couple right there. I don't have room for another one. So we just had 2 at this point. 2 ADA spaces. Back to parking component. Back to load family. Let's see. We have our symbol that we can add. Sometimes the frustrating thing is with this, sometimes it doesn't load everything. So we should have this symbol that we can put in our parking. Let me try it one more time. Cannot be loaded. Thanks. That's really helpful. All right. So we've got a pavement stripe that you can go in. Let's try and drop in some of these islands. Oh, great. This one's not available either. We get out of this. Go back into parking component. Maybe since y'all have just added Revit to your computer, maybe you can get it to work, but if I could at least get one to work, that would be nice. Anyway, technically you should be able to, it's really annoying, add these different units, these different components. And it makes it really interesting once you can add these different parking islands and things like that. Let's see if any of these directional arrows are going to work. No, nothing. At least we have parking spaces. Well, the really frustrating part is that the pre-made islands are not working, but you can still create one and it makes a difference to your site. So if we wanted to create like a little parking island here, what it would look like, it just adds the green space to your parking lot and it should be all preset and nice so we can have that done. All right, now I've got that. And then I could, well, you can see it change back to the mud color, but we can change that to grass. So you can make your own islands to make it really kind of pop. And it just really does make it a lot more interesting. Then a lot of times I'll have people come back with, you know, trees and things like that. They'll draw their trees or their shrubs in the islands. Let's see if we can pick like a little one. Trees. Let's just see what that looks like if we put one there. And then let's flip this around. It's pretty dark. Once we lighten it up, that would look better. But you can start making your own as well, which makes a difference in that. Hopefully, as you're working through this and you can do your own, your site components will actually work, your parking components. Let's see if there's anything else in there we want to play with. Nope, that's great. Anyway, hopefully yours works, but this is kind of what we want to work towards, having our, then I would add a couple of sidewalks. I could add my sidewalks along this way and things like that. So let's review what's to be accomplished again. Let's go back to our mod. So for creating our site, you want to add some varying site elevations. You want to create a parking lot with 50 parking spaces, 48 spaces, and preferably if you could do handicap signage. Hopefully your islands will work. If not, go ahead and create your own like we did and just change that to green space. create sidewalks and street access to parking lot, and any additional structures, plantings, and bikes and things that you can add. And you can just find those in the other component parts and stuff. So that's pretty much it for today. Any questions before we end for today? Okay, if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and end class for today. If you do have questions during the week, feel free to shoot me a text and I'll be happy to help you. So have a great one, y'all, and I'll see y'all Wednesday.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.